The biggest fear for me is to be deceived again, to face a cheating wife again. After a failed marriage, I was afraid to start a relationship for a long time. And so it would seem that I have found the one with whom I want to live my life. But after a while, I notice signs of betrayal. And I feel uneasy. I've been through this before and promised myself it wouldn't happen again. Should have heeded my own advice. But this time, I'm not shelling out $3,000 for a private investigator to tailor and gather evidence. This time, I'm simply filling out paperwork and saving myself the cash. My former wife, Lucy, dropped the bomb after 6 years, saying she wasn't happy with our life. Apparently, I worked too much, we never went anywhere, and she was bored stiff. Maybe if I hadn't hired someone to clean the house weekly and taken her out to dinner 3 times a week, she wouldn't have been so bored. But that's a whole other story. According to Lucy, things had been going downhill for a while, but I was either too blinded by love or too naive to see it. So I cut back on my hours and tried to be the perfect husband, or at least that's what I thought. I feel like every cheating woman follows the same playbook. It begins with small criticisms, then escalates to arguments. Eventually, there's a complete shift. Communication dwindles and conversations become shallow. The once vibrant bed life is gradually fading, from a few times a week to maybe once. And even then it seems lifeless. You endure it, apologizing for things you're not even responsible for, hoping for improvement. But it's never quite the same. Eventually, you're driven to consider the worst and resort to hiring someone to confirm your partner's fidelity. Within less than a fortnight, you realize your wife has stopped even entertaining the idea of intimacy, using it as a means to assert dominance. You contemplate the 12-year-old scotch in the liquor cabinet, but discard the thought, reserving it for a time when she's no longer part of your life. Another hefty sum goes to David, an unfeeling lawyer, and the legal documents are submitted. You silently thank your late father for insisting on a prenuptial agreement, grateful that your once trusting bride had willingly signed it, presumably back when she was still infatuated with you. She served while attending Pilates class. From the sidelines, you watch as the server approaches, confirming her identity as Mrs. Stephen Moore before handing her a sizable envelope, notifying her of the legal proceedings. The expression on her face in that moment is something you wish you could witness. Nonetheless, it's done, or will be finalized in a couple of months. I acted fairly as stipulated in the prenuptial agreement. Upon her return home, she finds a 50,000 reus check, her belongings packed in 15 garbage bags, the locks changed, and her credit cards canceled. Regrettably, the new BMW I gifted her for Christmas is also rightfully hers. Then comes the line, "Steve, honey, it meant nothing." "But it meant something to me," I reply. I arranged for a van and driver to swiftly remove her belongings, concluding the ordeal within 15 minutes. I neither knew nor cared where she went. Retreating indoors, I'm beckoned by a 12-year-old bottle of scotch. That marked the solitary occasion I indulged excessively. Following 4 months of firm refusals, she finally relents, and I am liberated from what was once a promising marriage. Occasionally, in the solitude of night, I miss the old Lucy. Yet when I contemplate her infidelity, that longing fades. I'm simply grateful we hadn't started a family together. For roughly a year and a half, I remained inactive. Although I socialized with friend groups, I made it clear up front that I wasn't interested in being set up, at least not yet. Around the 3-year mark, I started dating more frequently and eventually re-entered the dating scene. I found myself having more intimate encounters than I did during the last 2 years of my previous relationship. Then I encountered Vicky at a cancer fundraiser. Throughout the evening, I couldn't take my eyes off her as we sat across from each other. Despite hearing from friends that she was divorced and harbored bitterness toward men, I felt a connection, especially since I had also experienced betrayal in my past relationship. However, reality struck hard. It took 2 weeks before she even responded to my calls, and another 2 before she agreed to meet for coffee. Another month passed before she warmed up enough to join me for dinner. If she was playing hard to get, she was certainly excelling at it. The dinner was going smoothly until the interrogation began. How I met my ex-wife, what went awry in my marriage, and what I could have done differently to alter the outcome became the focal points. With each response, Vicky had another inquiry, until I grew weary of it. "She was unfaithful," I exclaimed, perhaps too loudly. "She made a commitment to me and violated it on multiple occasions. Why didn't you seek counseling?" "It might have salvaged your marriage," she remarked, a bit too smugly for my liking. The moment she betrayed me, it was over. She knew my stance on fidelity, and it was clearly stated in the prenup she signed. The terms were crystal clear. The party who cheats receives only a nominal share of our joint assets. Well, I attempted to reconcile with my ex for about a year before we divided everything evenly and parted ways. At least I can say I exhausted all options. "Vicky, you're far more forgiving than I could ever be. Frankly, she turned out to be a terrible wife. Can we please change the subject? It's putting me in a sour mood." "Steve, I just want to understand the kind of man I'm involved with, that's all." "Well, now you have your answer. If I don't meet your standards for a suitable partner, then I apologize, but this is who I am." Following that, the evening took a turn for the worse, and by 10:30, I was seeking a reason to end the date and take her home. The drive back was silent. I escorted her to her door and received a kiss, but thankfully I wasn't invited inside. I removed her name and number from my phone. I didn't deserve to be treated the way she treated me. I was enjoying a wonderful time with a charming lady at a nice steakhouse when I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Vicky. "What a coincidence to see you here," she remarked, glancing at my date. "Forgive my manners," I said, shifting in my seat. "Vicky, meet Amber." "Amber, this is Vicky, a woman I met at this year's cancer fundraiser." I said it with a smile, but I wished Vicky would vanish, and fast. "I spotted you and just wanted to say hello." By then, her date had joined her. "We're heading to that new jazz club off Fairmont downtown." "Well, enjoy your evening," she said, finally walking away with her date. "Did you used to date her?" Amber inquired. "It was just one date, and it wasn't particularly memorable," I replied, reaching for her hand. "Was I lucky that night?" "Luck had nothing to do with it." Amber pulled me into her condo and took charge until we both fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. 2 days later, I received an email on my computer. "It was nice to see you again. Perhaps we could grab drinks sometime." "I feel like our last encounter got off to a rocky start." "Sure thing." We exchanged emails and had a few phone conversations over the next couple of weeks before deciding to meet at a nightclub popular with an older crowd. Why am I even doing this? I pondered, seated at a table for two, waiting for her. If only she had let me pick her up. But no, Vicky, considering our last meeting didn't go smoothly, chose to meet here. And now she was 15 minutes late. I caught sight of her walking in from the corner of my eye. Damn, she looked stunning. I wasn't sure if what she was wearing qualified as a dress, as it seemed to lack material. Every guy in the room ogled her as she passed by, even those with dates. I stood up and took 3 steps toward her. "Sorry I'm late, my car wouldn't start, so I had to take a cab here." "Don't worry, with how you look, I'd wait all night," I replied, cringing inwardly at how cheesy it sounded, but knowing it was true, as I pulled out her chair. "We can sit later. Right now, all I want to do is dance." And dance we did, for the next 25 minutes. The DJ alternated between 2 fast songs and 2 slow ones for the next hour. I had to fend off more than one guy insisting Vicky dance with them. She just smiled and held me a little tighter. Upon returning to our table, I took the liberty of ordering drinks, a whiskey sour for her and a Corona for myself. This time, there were no interrogations or the standoffish demeanor she had exhibited on our previous date. She initiated conversation. "I apologize for last time. I'd endured some truly awful dates and decided to get to know you a bit right away. I'm sorry I was so direct, but if you were unpleasant, I wasn't going to waste time with small talk all night. Well, did I meet your standards? What do you think? I'm here, aren't I? The remainder of the evening felt effortless, at least for me. She looked stunning and fit perfectly in my arms. We disregarded the upbeat tunes, opting instead to dance only to the slow ones. Would you mind giving me a ride home? Getting a cab at this hour would require a miracle. We exited the club arm in arm. I received a passionate kiss, but no invitation inside. Did I anticipate it? Not really. Vicky was the kind of person who preferred to take things slowly, though I hoped it wouldn't be too slow after holding her all night. We met twice a week. Gradually, we escalated our relationship, and by the 6th week, I woke up on Sunday morning in her bed. I hope you don't think less of me, she said, watching me wake up. You're even better than I expected, she added with a smile. What? You thought you'd have to guide me through everything, show me where everything is and what to do with it. After all, I was married before. So was I, but my ex never understood that lovemaking involves both people, and both need to be satisfied before it's over. I chuckled, but she didn't. He was selfish, not just with me. That's why he's an ex. Men can be foolish, even those who have been married and divorced at least once. After that night, our honeymoon phase began. I wouldn't say I was in love, but I was captivated by her beauty and discovered we enjoyed doing many of the same things. I didn't think we were exclusive yet, and it seemed she didn't either, because one evening while I was having dinner with a client and his wife, I spotted Vicky with another guy. We didn't exchange glances or play any games. She noticed me when I sat down, but I had other matters on my mind. My client and his wife were an incredible couple, deeply in love even after 35 years. "Steve, are you married?" his wife inquired. I was, but not anymore. "Do you see yourself tying the knot again?" "I'm not sure. She would have to be exceptionally special, and there's the issue of trust I'd need to overcome." "Your ex-wife cheated on you, didn't she?" "She had a knack for understanding me." "Yes, and it didn't end well." "Well, there are plenty of good ones out there, even those with some experience like yourself. You're too good of a person to be alone." She was right about that. Being single was tough. But not being able to trust your partner was even worse. Once more, we exchanged glances before she and her friend departed. I pondered whether she was going to be intimate with him, and it bothered me immensely. 30 minutes later, as we were wrapping up dessert and bidding farewell, his wife leaned in. "I hope you and your friend can sort things out. Maybe it was merely a business dinner like ours," she said with a smile, giving my hand a squeeze before they walked off together hand in hand. My attempt to conceal my emotions had clearly failed. I lingered at the bar nursing a drink. I vowed not to overreact unless, of course, she had indeed been intimate with him. In that case, I didn't know how I'd react. Upon tossing my car keys onto the kitchen counter, my phone vibrated. "Can you come over now?" "I think we need to talk." I wasn't particularly inclined to engage in a conversation with Vicky at such a late hour, but there was one thing I needed to know. "Did you sleep with him?" "Yes," came her reply moments later. "I wasn't going to deceive you if you asked." That was the last message I read before turning off my phone. Vicky texted and called me on Wednesday and Thursday evenings, but I didn't respond because I was still unsure of what to say to her. Was I jealous? Absolutely. Despite not being officially exclusive, I hadn't even considered another woman. However, it seemed that might change. On Friday, I took Beth to a club on the west side of downtown. Despite the loud atmosphere, a local band was performing, and I recognized 2 of the members. We danced, enjoyed a few drinks, and I even introduced Beth to the band during their 9:00 break. I was having a good time until I felt a familiar tap on my shoulder. "Would you like to dance?" she asked, looking annoyed. "Can't you see I'm with someone?" "Besides, you're probably here with your own date," I replied over the music. I'm here with a couple of girlfriends. If you decide to take me up on my offer, I'll be at that table, she said, pointing to 1-3 over. I'll consider it. Our eyes met once more before she walked away. I thought you said you weren't seeing anyone? Beth asked. We just broke up, I explained, speaking into her ear. Does she know? That brief encounter ruined my evening. When Beth noticed me glancing at Vicky too often, she insisted I take her home. I didn't protest. Don't contact me until you've both ended it. I didn't even receive a goodnight kiss. At 1:15, I felt my phone buzz. Did you sleep with her? I don't divulge such details, unlike some others. I went back to sleep. Early Saturday morning, my doorbell rang once, then repeatedly every 10 seconds or so. Damn kids. You can run, but you can't hide, Vicky said, leaning against the doorframe, 2 cups of coffee and what I assumed was breakfast in hand. Are you going to invite me in, or are we going to have breakfast and chat on your doorstep? Either option works for me. I stepped aside and she entered. I trailed behind her into the kitchen and watched as she unpacked everything. Not sure what you prefer, so I improvised. Where do you keep the plates? Half asleep, I shuffled over, retrieved 2 plates, juice glasses, and some silverware. Glancing at the clock, I noted it wasn't even 6 mon yet. We ate in silence, but our eyes communicated volumes. With the food finished, I sat there, sipping my coffee. Vicky, what are you after? To talk first and then take it from there. I was too exhausted to participate in what I expected to be a lengthy conversation. Now I'm going to sleep for a couple of hours again. I invite you to join me, and maybe we can chat when we wake up, I said, climbing the stairs to my bedroom. Vicky followed my example. She took off her outer clothes and gave me a meaningful look. If I had known that we would be in bed right away, I would have brought something attractive with me, she remarked with a smile before slipping under the sheet. For the next hour, we hugged and pretended to be asleep. But let's be honest, none of us actually slept, even with our eyes closed. I do not know how it happened, but for the next 30 minutes we did it without a break. Lying on my back, I noticed, I need to take a shower. No, don't, Vicky said, kissing me on the lips. You smell like me, and I want you to stay that way. I have to go to work by Monday, and my boss won't like it, so let's take a shower. Besides, we need to discuss a few things today. There were no screams, but the voices were raised more than once. I want us to have an exclusive relationship, or I don't want to date you anymore, I told her. Why don't we take our time and see where this leads? Is it because you want to be with other guys? I interjected as soon as she finished speaking. I don't want to worry about who else you might have a relationship with besides me. And if we don't succeed, at least we can say that we have done everything in our power. Steve, this is an important step for me. I need time to think about everything, she said after spending the night in my bed. By Monday morning, we were one of a kind. I wish I could say everything was going perfectly, but that wasn't the reality. There were challenges on both sides, and at times I doubted whether we would make it. After 3 months, Vicky moved in with me. I must confess, I pleaded with her because I longed to wake up next to her every morning, not just on weekends. I even sacrificed my large bedroom double closet for all her clothes, and she did have quite a collection. I was overjoyed, feeling like I couldn't picture my life without her. At 9 months, I took the leap and proposed. Did I have reservations? Yes and no. I'd been hurt before, but I couldn't let that dictate my future relationships. I decided to go for it. Instead of the traditional one-knee proposal, I simply asked her over dessert at Tony's Italian restaurant. My only mistake was not having the ring beforehand. I thought it would be special if we chose it together. I was mistaken. I clasped her hands in mine across the table and confessed my love. When I proposed forever, she eagerly said, yes. But then things took a bit of a downturn. She extended her hand, seemingly expecting a ring I hadn't brought. Darling, I thought it would be nicer for us to choose your ring together. Wait, you didn't buy me a ring? Were you hedging in case I said no? I needed to regain control. You know my taste in jewelry, I assured her, gazing into her eyes. I might have picked something flashy that you'd secretly detest but pretend to love for my sake. This way you can have the ring you've always dreamed of. That's so thoughtful. I love you so much, she said, leaning in for a kiss. Sure, she ended up spending more than I had budgeted for her ring, but seeing her happy with it was all that mattered. Our wedding was small and intimate, with no more than 60 of our closest family and friends. We exchanged vows in a gazebo within a rose garden near her parents' home. Her sister, Amber, stood by her side while my brother, Greg, was my best man. We booked a room in one of the finest restaurants, and by 10:30, Vicky was mine forever. Following an intimate honeymoon, we settled into our post-honeymoon routine, which was nothing short of amazing. About 6 months later, in the midst of a blissful moment, she broached the topic of children. You mentioned wanting 2 kids, but we never discussed when. How about now? She asked. Still basking in the afterglow, I asked for 20 minutes before we'd begin trying. Her smile was radiant, and for the next month I experienced the best intimacy of my life, sealing our decision. I'm pregnant, exclaimed Vicky, waving the positive test. You'd better share in my excitement because I'm over the moon. And I was. I was a devoted husband before and after the arrival of our daughter Carrie. From changing diapers to soothing her late-night cries, I embraced every aspect of fatherhood. 2 years later, when Dale entered the world, our family felt complete. Rather than Vicky resuming birth control, I opted for a vasectomy. Though discomfort followed for a few days, it was a small price to pay for Vicky's peace of mind. Life was wonderful, until it wasn't. She embraced the role of a homemaker while I dedicated myself to excelling in my career, driven by the responsibility of providing for my family. For 5.5 years, I felt like I was on cloud 9, until I began to sense a subtle shift. Despite Vicky's unwavering dedication to motherhood and our intimate moments together, there was an elusive something lingering beneath the surface. I couldn't quite pinpoint it at first, but I couldn't ignore the distant gaze in her eyes when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Sweetheart, is everything all right? You seem preoccupied, I inquired, approaching her from behind as she gazed out the window. Just reflecting on how happy I am, she replied, reaching back to hold my hand. I kissed her hand, momentarily dismissing my unfounded suspicions. Love was our foundation, and in that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. After wrapping up a demanding 3-month project at work, I treated my wife to a dinner at the finest restaurant in town. I apologize for not being around as much lately, I said, but the profits from that project more than compensate. With those words, I produced a red velvet box from my pocket and revealed its contents. A ring adorned with 6 flawless diamonds, each symbolizing a year of our marriage. Her expression was priceless. You really shouldn't have, she murmured, but eagerly tried it on. Though it was a costly gesture, our finances were comfortable and I wanted to show my appreciation for her unwavering support during my long hours at work. Life seemed to be back on track, or so I believed. As our intimate moments dwindled from 4 times a week to perhaps 2, I remained silent. She cited fatigue and occasional illness as reasons. I didn't press her but took note. When 3 weeks passed without her initiating intimacy, I sensed something amiss. One day, passing by the den, I noticed her on the computer. I grinned and offered my assistance as I was the family's tech expert. The surprise on her face spoke volumes. She glanced up, mentioned she was just wrapping up, and promptly shut her laptop. I should start thinking about dinner or else we'll end up dining out tonight, she said with a faint smile. After a quick peck on the lips, Vicky headed towards the kitchen. As she walked away, my curiosity overwhelmed me. When she disappeared around the corner, I sneaked into the den and opened her laptop, which was still on her home page. For the next 10 minutes, I tried to uncover what she had been working on, but found nothing. Her browsing history and email accounts had been wiped clean. A familiar sense of unease settled in my stomach. From then on, I observed her closely, documenting any deviations from her usual routine. Small discrepancies began to accumulate. Suddenly, she started having midweek lunches with her sister without prior explanation. Despite my inquiries, she offered only familiar excuses, leaving everything feeling different. When I could no longer ignore my suspicions, I decided to follow her one day when she mentioned another lunch appointment. Hanging back in my rental car, I watched as she dropped off our children at her mother's house. She was dressed casually, in jeans and a tank top, seemingly not preparing for any illicit rendezvous, or so I thought. After she drove off, I called her sister's cell to confirm their lunch plans, then followed her from a distance of about 3 car lengths. She picked up on the second ring. "Steve, what brings you to call me today?" I had to be cautious not to reveal too much. "I'm planning a small gathering for next weekend and wanted to check if you have any prior commitments." "Let me check my schedule on my phone," she said, her phone falling silent for a few seconds. Then I heard it. "Mom, can I have a drink?" "Just a moment, dear. Mommy's talking to Uncle Steve on the phone," she returned. "Nope, nothing on the schedule. And do pass along to my sister to give me a call once in a while, will you? I understand she's busy with the kids, but a quick call wouldn't hurt." "No problem. I'll relay the message and we'll confirm with you about next weekend." Damn, not again. That's when I lost her at the next traffic light. Vicky went through a yellow light and I was about to run the red when cars filled the intersection. I watched as her car went one more block and then turned right. "Come on, change already." After the traffic light finally changed, I hit the gas pedal. I made the right turn and then there was nothing. Her car was nowhere to be seen. I circled the area for about an hour, even checking the parking lots of 2 motels nearby. But there was no sign of her. I tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Damn it. I drove back home and waited for her return. I felt like having a drink, but I decided against it. I needed to be clear-headed when she finally arrived. At 4:30, she walked in with Dale and Carrie in tow. "Steve, why are you home so early?" Vicky asked, surprised as she struggled to get both kids through the front door. I got up to help her. "I had a light afternoon and thought I'd come home to spend time with my wife. How was your lunch with Amber?" "It was fine," she replied shortly. "Where did you two eat anyway?" Her eyes widened, and she hesitated before answering. "We went to that new salad place on Vineland. I can't remember the name, but it was nice. Why don't you be a dear and grab their bags from the car while I put them down for a nap?" In her car, there wasn't any conclusive evidence. I was hoping for a clue about her whereabouts in the past few hours. Despite my frustration, I maintained the facade of a dutiful husband. With the kids asleep, I observed as Vicky undressed and headed into the shower. "Dale might be coming down with the flu. He vomited on me when I picked him up from Mom's," she mentioned. "Need some company?" I offered. "No, just a quick rinse. What's for dinner?" Food was the furthest thing from my mind. "How about ordering a couple of pizzas?" I suggested. "Sounds good," Vicky agreed as she stepped out of the shower. I joined her as she dried off. There were no visible signs of anything amiss. This was her third supposed lunch with her sister. I recalled how it all began with Lucy. The lies were there, along with a decline in intimacy. Yet I lacked concrete evidence. Now I regretted not having Vicky sign a prenuptial agreement like I did with Lucy. I was in trouble. Dinner passed in silence, too much silence. While our children ate, I observed Vicky toying with her slice of pizza. Was it guilt? I helped with bedtime routines, usually adding some playful roughhousing, but tonight I lacked the energy. A story, a kiss, and a hug were all I managed. Vicky moved about as if in a daze until I approached her from behind, enveloping her in my arms and kissing her neck. "Steve!" Not tonight, she protested, trying to break free. If not tonight, when? I retorted with frustration. It's been nearly 2 weeks, for heaven's sake. When do you plan on addressing our issues at home? Steve, please. Not tonight. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. I promise. Fine, I replied sarcastically, heading towards my home office. She just doesn't want me to discover she was with someone else this afternoon, I concluded, slamming the door shut and locking it. My email to the attorney managing my divorce from Lucy was brief and direct. Please proceed with the instructions I provided yesterday. Categorize the case under adultery, and I'm seeking custody of my children. I'll follow up tomorrow, but I needed this action taken yesterday. Although I lacked concrete evidence of Vicky's infidelity, the circumstantial evidence was compelling. This marked the second time I'd married a wonderful caregiver but a disappointing spouse. However, this time, I wasn't waiting for the inevitable. I was ending things before they worsened. I spent the night on the office couch and left for work before anyone else in the house stirred. With a busy agenda ahead, I took steps like freezing our bank accounts and reducing the credit card limits. By noon, my attorney had a preliminary draft ready for review, which I promptly edited and returned. The finalized divorce paperwork arrived by 5, a testament to what can be achieved with sufficient resources. However, I instructed my attorney to hold off on filing until I confirmed. Tonight would be difficult, but it was necessary to proceed. I returned home to find the house silent. "Vicky," I called out. "In the kitchen," came her monotone response. I retrieved the manila envelope from my briefcase, resigning myself to dealing with it. Might as well, I thought as I made my way to the kitchen. Vicky sat at the table, a glass of wine before her, wearing that distant look once more. Perhaps she had somehow sensed that I knew. "Care for a drink?" she asked, heading towards the refrigerator. "A beer would be good." She handed me a Corona and spoke as she returned to her seat. "The kids are with my parents tonight." She took a long sip of wine. "I need to talk to you about something, and you're not going to like it." I nearly responded, "I already know," but realized it was her moment. So I sat there quietly, sipping my beer and toying with the envelope. For the past month, when I said I was having lunch with my sister, I was lying. I was seeing someone else. I wanted to lash out and call her names, but I bit my tongue. "Steve, I've been diagnosed with a brain tumor. Over the last 3 weeks, Dr. Koop and his team have been conducting every test imaginable to assess its severity." I was shocked. Yeah, I had the same reaction. I've been experiencing headaches and difficulty concentrating for a while now. I thought it was just fatigue and lack of sleep. But no matter how much rest I got, something felt off. That's when I went to our general practitioner for a thorough checkup. She took another sip of her drink. He couldn't pinpoint the issue, so he referred me to a specialist. "Wait a minute," I interjected, leaning forward. "This has been going on for months, and you never mentioned anything was wrong. Steve, whenever I wasn't feeling well and turned you down at night, you got upset. I wanted to be intimate with you, but I just couldn't muster the energy, and I didn't want another argument." I slid the envelope off the table onto my lap. "Last week I underwent a CAT scan and an MRI to confirm Dr. Koop's suspicions. Steve, I'm so sorry," she confessed, before breaking down in tears. I rushed to her side in an instant. For the next 20 minutes, she buried her head in the crook of my neck, intermittently pausing and then resuming. Meanwhile, a flurry of self-criticism stormed through my mind. How could I ever suspect this woman of betrayal? I gently pulled her away, meeting her gaze with those tear-filled eyes. "What did the doctor say today?" It took her a moment to collect herself. "He said if I don't have surgery soon, I'll die." "I don't want to die," she cried, reaching out to me again. And so the next 2 hours passed, with me piecing together most of Dr. Koop's prognosis by 8 Mao. He wants us both in his office tomorrow morning at 9. To discuss the next steps. I'm so sorry, she repeated for the second time. Vicky, this isn't your fault. Together we'll get through this, you hear me? She nodded, though I could sense her disbelief. Fear gripped us both. By tension, she had collapsed onto the bed. No wonder she had seemed distant these past weeks, grappling with the uncertainty. I didn't want to worry you, she had explained. As she slept, I wrestled with my own inner turmoil. The following day, we paused for coffee and a light meal. Despite lacking hunger, we both felt the need for caffeine to get through the day. Dr. Kiup appeared to be in his early 50s from my estimation. He presented all the information, displaying the x-rays and explaining his proposed plan. Mr. Moore, the situation isn't promising, but I believe I can remove the tumor with minimal damage to your wife's brain, he said. What are the chances of her recovering to her previous state before this growth emerged? I inquired. Mr. Moore, as I mentioned to your wife, she stands an 80% chance of returning to a normal life if we proceed with the surgery promptly. However, I cannot confirm yet if the tumor is malignant. If it is, the odds will significantly decrease in her favor, he explained. When can the surgery be scheduled? I asked. I have an available slot next Tuesday. If you agree, we need to undertake several preparations before then, he replied. For me, there seemed to be no alternative. It all began with a comprehensive physical examination, including blood tests. My wife had to undergo additional procedures such as x-rays, another MRI, and several other tests that I didn't fully comprehend. While her parents took care of our children, we ensured to check in with them, or at least call them every night. The night before the surgery, we lay in bed attempting to find some semblance of sleep. It proved futile. All I could discern was her breathing, and sensing my wakefulness, she spoke without meeting my gaze. I found it discarded in the trash on Sunday. My heart momentarily ceased its beat. While emptying the household bins, I noticed the crumpled envelope sitting on top. I don't know why I retrieved it and opened it, but now I regret it deeply. She fell silent. I'm deeply sorry, I murmured into her ear. I feared a repeat of the past, but I should have confided in you. But you didn't. Did you truly think so little of me that you'd contemplate divorce without a word? She lapsed into silence once more. Once this is resolved, I'm leaving, and I'm uncertain if I'll return. I remained wordless. My actions had already spoken volumes. The surgery lasted 9 grueling hours. I remained in the waiting room until I could bear it no longer. Leaving my contact details with the receptionist, I wandered the grounds. Guilt weighed heavily upon me for what I had nearly done. Yet my sole desire was for my beloved to survive, even if it meant without me. My phone buzzed, and I hurried back to the waiting room and sought out Dr. Kiup. He appeared almost as fatigued as I felt. I believe we've successfully removed it, he announced, removing his cap. Samples have been sent to the lab, and the initial assessment suggests the tumor was benign. I exhaled the breath I had been holding since our conversation began. May I see her? Not at the moment. Why don't you return home, rest, grab a meal, and come back later tonight? By then, she'll be in a room, and you can stay as long as you like. I followed his advice. I reached out to everyone with the good news and instructed them to hold off on visiting until I gave the green light. I expressed gratitude to her mother for looking after the kids and promised to swing by on my way back to the hospital. After freshening up and having a hearty breakfast at Denny's, uncertain when I'd get another chance to eat, I assured my children that their mom was recovering well and they'd be able to visit in a couple of days. They were eager to come along with me and couldn't understand why they couldn't. Is she really going to be okay? Her mom asked as she walked me to my car. The doctor said she needs plenty of rest, but she'll be back to herself in a month or two. I hope you two can work things out. It would be a shame to throw it all away after everything. I was taken aback. She confided in me. Let me give you the same advice I gave her. Marriage takes effort, and if you don't communicate, it won't last. You should have talked when you first noticed something was wrong, and she should have told you when she got sick. You've got a second chance now. Don't waste it. With a hug and kiss on the cheek, I returned to the hospital and my wife. The nurse stationed at the reception directed me straight in, saying, "Your wife woke up about half an hour ago and wondered where you were. I informed her that you had gone home to change and grab something to eat. She's still a bit dazed, so if she nods off and goes back to sleep, don't worry. Thank you for everything you've done." "Don't thank me." Dr. Cube performed the surgery. The room was dim, but the blinds were drawn back, allowing the lights from the cars in the parking lot and the street to cast patterns on the ceiling and walls. When the door closed, she turned to face me. I approached her bedside and reached for her hand. "How are you feeling?" In a soft tone, she replied, "Luckily, I'm still under the influence of the drugs and can't feel a thing. But once the good drugs wear off, I'll probably start feeling some pain." "Thank goodness I have this," she said, holding up what resembled a red call button. "If and when I begin to experience any pain, I press this button, and I receive a dose of pain reliever. Neat, right? The only issue is that I can only press it once an hour so I don't overdose." I kissed the bandaged top of her head. "Digging the new haircut? Are you going punk on me?" Her small smile indicated that I had broken the tension. "I'm sorry you found the divorce papers. After you told me about your condition, I crumpled them up and threw them in the trash outside. How did you come across them?" "It seems someone's dog must have tipped over our trash can, and when I gathered everything up, I noticed the envelope on top as I was about to empty the kitchen trash. The only reason I opened it was because I saw my name on the outside and didn't recognize it." She fell silent again, but kept her gaze fixed on mine. You can imagine my surprise when I saw what was inside. I began to apologize and offer my explanations, but she cut me off. "At least now I know your true feelings toward me. Vicky, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake." Damn right it was. After that, neither of us spoke. Vicky lay back on the bed and closed her eyes. As for me, I just sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair and held her hand until she drifted back to sleep. This time it was going to take more than just an apology. I spent the week shuttling between work and the hospital. I managed to sneak my kids in on Thursday, which earned me some points with Vicky. There were tears, hugs, and even some laughter, before we were caught and kicked out. The next week, I escorted Vicky back home. I devoted 3 days to tending to her every need, then relinquished my role to her mother. I often brought home dinner, suggesting to her mother that there was a husband eagerly awaiting her return. "If I know my husband, he's probably overjoyed, indulging in all the things I usually prevent him from doing. It'll take me ages to get him back on track after this." I knew she adored Herb deeply, and I sympathized with him for the time she spent at our place. However, whenever I hinted at her departure, she reminded me that I was the one bringing in the income, and bills would soon need paying. "Don't fret. I'll be leaving soon, and then you'll have to deal with my daughter. I don't envy you that task." She leaned in and whispered, "Have you spoken to her yet?" "I've tried, but she's not ready." "Well, I suggest you do it soon. She's on the mend, and if I know her, that stubborn streak will resurface before long." I took her advice to heart. We began eating dinner together as a family every night. Vicky cooked about 20% of the time, and I handled the rest. Though my kids insisted I wasn't as skilled a cook as their mother, they didn't complain when I ordered pizza or Chinese. I'd gained 5 pounds since Vicky had returned home. On Friday, with the kids hopefully asleep and no work looming the next day, I attempted to draw closer to cuddle as we settled into bed. Despite being rebuffed a few times before, tonight I was determined. As I wrapped my arms around her, she tensed. Undeterred, I pressed on. "Do you want to talk? Or should we just accept things as they are and go our separate ways, I murmured softly. I'm so furious with you that I could scream. Then go ahead and let it out. We need to resolve this one way or another. She turned to face me. How could you accuse me of cheating? Consider it from my point of view. You became distant. Our intimacy dropped from 3 or 4 times a week to almost none. When I tried to approach you, you pushed me away or lied to me. Do you see the similarity? It reminded me of how my ex-wife behaved before everything fell apart. But I wasn't cheating. I was trying to spare you the pain until I knew for sure what was wrong with me. I guess I wasn't as good at hiding it as I thought. To be honest, you were terrible at it. But let me ask again. What do we do now? Maybe I should take the kids and leave, she said hesitatingly. If you leave, I'll start the divorce process. You'd really divorce me? I wouldn't want to, but yes. You can be so heartless. If you had been through what I have with my ex, you might understand. But look, I'm sorry for overreacting. And I'm still upset that you told your mom before me. I had to. She was babysitting for us. We fell silent. I have a suggestion. Why don't we get some rest and talk about this in the morning? I said, holding her close. I have a better idea, Vicky said, leaning in to kiss me. Needless to say, we didn't get much sleep that night. 6 months later, we found ourselves in a luxurious women's fashion store. Vicky emerged wearing a stunning red dress, provocative enough to stir even the deceased. What do you think? She inquired, spinning around to display every angle. Do you reckon they'd mind if we borrowed their fitting room for an hour? And risk being tardy for my surprise party? Not a chance, she replied. It marked 1 year since her surgery. As we strolled back to the car, she clasped my hand tighter. You know I love you, right? Never questioned it, I affirmed, gazing at her. You're such an asshole. Only to you, I retorted, pulling her close. I'm just relieved we sorted things out. You mean you're glad we did, don't you? Whatever, she muttered, slipping into the car. Starting the engine, I leaned over and kissed her. Oh, and try to act surprised. Your parents put a lot of effort into this party. I figured it out weeks ago. Why clue me in? After all the secrecy and sneaking around before, I didn't want to repeat that. No more secrets. Agreed? I kissed her once more before departing. No more secrets. Open communication. And cherish each other as if it were the last day together. That's been our daily motto since Dr. Coop granted us a second chance.